Taylaron's story. Chapter 4. Aria was already awake. She stood next to the dining table, shoving items in her leather bag, with a concentrated look on her face. Elowen, on the other hand, was tucked under the covers on the bed behind me, still asleep. "Are you going somewhere?" I asked. Aria picked up a metal box from the table and carefully positioned it inside her bag. "I am going to the library," she said. I shoved the thin sheet off and sat up. "The library?" "Yes," she said. "I need to do some research. It's urgent." Aria stepped closer to the door, and I was about to let her leave, but I didn't want to be left alone with nothing to do again. "What are you going to research?" I asked. Aria stopped in the doorway. She glanced in my direction, but not at me. She was looking at Elowen. It's about my sister." She paused. "Every time these transformations happen, she gets weaker. I need to do research, so I know what to do." Aria turned towards the exit again. "Can I come with you?" I said. "Okay," she replied, "but you should hurry." I nodded, brushed my arms through the sleeves of my jumper, and hastily assembled a scarf. It's not that it was cold. It wasn't. Not for a human, at least. It was protection from the sun, not cold. I rushed out onto the porch, still feeling a little dazed from sleep, my hair tangled and ruffled. Aria gave me a nod of acknowledgement and began walking. I'd expected Aria to turn towards the city, but she walked into the same direction we had headed in to forage mushrooms. I rummaged through my head, wondering whether I'd simply forgotten which direction the city was in. Could I have been misremembering? But the further we walked, the surer I became that we were heading deeper into the forest. "Where are we going?" I asked. "The library," Aria replied. "I understand that," I said. "But why are we heading away from the city?" Aria glanced up at me, her facial expression almost confused. Then she shook her head. "No, we're not headed to the city. The library I want to visit is in a druid village. Their villages normally have some very good libraries." I nodded. I didn't know much about druids at all. I knew that there weren't many back home on Doran, and I knew that there were plenty here in Zelodania. But I didn't know much more than that. I'd come across some villagers while navigating the forest, but whether they were druid villages or not, I would not be able to say. I'd avoided coming into these villages, not knowing who could live there and how they might feel about half vampires. As we walked, I imagined the types of libraries these druid villages may have, the types of people who might live there. But it wasn't long until these thoughts left my head, displaced by a general feeling of fatigue. About an hour into walking, I was starting to regret not having eaten breakfast at home. To make matters worse, my feet were already getting sore. Being a weakling half-vampire didn't help. At times like this, it was easy to be envious of human stamina, but at the same time, I had to remind myself of how lucky I was to merely be a half-vampire, not a full one. Finally, Aria stopped. Was this the end of our walk? I looked around, trying to peer through the foliage, but no village was in sight. Aria sat down on a log and opened her bag. She slipped out the metal box she had packed and looked up at me. "I wanted to take a little rest from walking," she said. I sat down on the log next to her, afraid to ask how much longer it would be until we would finally reach the library. Aria opened the box, revealing a neatly packed lunch. The meal seemed to be made up of starchy tubers, cut into cubes. A golden sauce was drizzled over the top. "It's taro. It grows well here in Zelodania," she said. She fished out a fork from her bag and offered it to me. "You should try some." I tried a piece. This plant didn't grow on Doran, but I found it similar in taste and texture to potato. Together, Ari and I cleared out the lunchbox in no time. Soon, it was time to start walking again. So, these druids, I started, are they welcoming to outsiders? Yes, very much so, as long as you respect their customs and religious beliefs. Arya continued walking, not elaborating much further. I tried imagining the village, but scenarios of various cultural mistakes bubbled into my mind. It was already difficult enough to get used to Zelodania, and I imagined Druid culture to be even more dissimilar to what I was accustomed to. What types of customs does one need to respect? Is there anything I should know before we go in? I asked. Arya seemed to think for a bit. Don't damage their village, and especially not their plants. Don't waste food or pollute the environment. Be respectful in general. I nodded. This all seemed simple enough. And are you sure they don't have anything against half vampires? Or vampires in general? Arya shook her head. No. I think that's more of a Doran thing. No one here would even really know the difference between half and full vampire. They might not even assume that you're a vampire at all. They might just assume that you're a pale boy with red eyes. Huh. It seemed like things worked a little differently here. On Doran, red eyes were enough to instantly brand you as a vampire. It's not that people hated vampires. With its perpetually overcast weather, there were enough vampires on Doran that people were simply used to them. Being a half-vampire, on the other hand, was considered an outcome of immorality by some ignorant people. I was not correctly a vampire, and not correctly a human. And for what it's worth, continued Arya, I think even on Doran, the negative attitude towards half-vampires just stemmed from jealousy. I glanced at Arya curiously. Well, think about it. As a half-vampire, you have all of the positives, no aging, no diseases, and less of the negatives. Half-vampires get sunburnt less, right? I nodded. That's right. And we need less blood, too. Arya gave me a warm smile. See? It's just objectively better. They only get away with the bad treatment because half-vampires are rarer. I smiled back. Arya faced forward, and I did the same. Through the trees, I saw the village. There were a few wooden and stone buildings harmoniously interspersed with old trees. A taller building, maybe 2 or 3 stories tall, stood out from the rest. It was made almost fully of wood, with vines twining up the walls in decorative patterns. We walked through the village straight for the library. A few kids were running around the village, playing some sort of game. They stopped running and stared at us with green eyes as we walked. Nearby, a few people tended to a garden. They looked up at us too, and for a second I was worried, but they smiled at us. All of them wore simple clothes, in green or shades of brown. Their hair was worn in long hairstyles. I felt a little out of place, almost like an invader in their village. Finally, we stood in front of the library. Its doors were thick, with various plants and animals engraved into the wood. Arya pushed on the door, and it creaked. The interior of the library was softly lit. Bookshelves covered each wall. A few shelves were clustered in the middle of the large room. In the far end of the room stood a wooden desk. At the desk sat a librarian, his brown hair wavy and long. Arya bowed. "Hello," she said. "We would like to use your library today." The librarian nodded. "You are welcome to view our collection," he said. "Please be respectful of our space and do not eat or drink in the library. Let me know if you need any help." Arya smiled. "Of course." We walked around the room, looking at the shelves. Each portion of the room was sorted into its own category. fiction, non-fiction, documents. We went to the non-fiction section, which was further divided into subcategories. We found the section on ailments. "Help me look," said Aria. "We'll be faster if both of us search in parallel." She was already facing the shelf, her eyes darting from book to book. "What do you want me to look for?" I asked. "Any mentions of a disease that sounds like Elowen's? Anything about weakness, about morphing?" Aria placed her finger on the spine of each book as she sorted through them. I began sorting too. There were a few books about common diseases, which I didn't even open. If Elowen's disease was common, we wouldn't be in this predicament. Next came a few books dedicated to vampirism, but I could tell you myself that Elowen was not a vampire. Next came curses, ailments of the bowel, intolerances. My finger stopped on the title, Rare Diseases and Curses. I gently tugged at the spine of the book, and it slid out. Its cover was wrapped in black fabric with silver lettering. I flipped through the pages. Some of these diseases were quite frightening to even read about, and the illustrations definitely didn't help. I flipped past the irrelevant diseases, mostly to avoid permanently scarring myself with knowledge no one but a doctor should have. Then, an intricate ink illustration caught my eye. It depicted a large beast standing in front of a starry sky, a big full moon hanging over it. It didn't look anything like Elowen's transformation. Yes, it had sharp teeth and scales, but this was where the resemblance ended. Elowen's transformation was more lizard-like, slender. This image depicted something larger, more menacing. The scales were rough and pointed in almost random directions. Still, I decided to read this description. The morphing curse of the moon. The curse loses consciousness and morphs into a beast. The transformation could happen at any time, but occurs more commonly during a full moon. This is also when the transformation is the most powerful. At all phases of the moon, transformations are most common during the night. The cure for this curse depends on the cause of the curse. Please view the possible causes and cures on the following page. I glanced over to the page on the right, skimming over the possible cures. No, the illustration did not resemble Elowen's transformation, but was it possible that the image depicted what the transformation looked like during a full moon in its most powerful form? Was it a full moon yesterday? I remembered it being bright, but whether the moon was full, I did not remember. Aria sat at the table, concentrating on a book she'd just picked out. "Aria, look at this," I said. She looked up. I slid the book over to her. She skimmed the contents. "This is about a curse, but Elowen isn't cursed. Not as far as I know." She paused, skimming another paragraph. "Still, it could be worth bringing this to Mimi. Maybe she'd be able to come up with something." "I'll go ask the librarian whether we can borrow it then?" Aria nodded. I picked up the book and carried it to the long-haired druid. He sat at his desk, reading. May we borrow this book?" The librarian glanced up. "Sorry, we don't allow visitors to remove books from our collection." Aria's footsteps clicked behind me. She stopped next to me in front of the information desk. "This might have information that could help my sister," she said. "I was hoping to take it to her doctor." The librarian's eyes scanned the title of the book. He looked up at us. "Is there a specific page that you need? I may be able to copy a page or two for you." Aria nodded, pointing to the page on morphing curses. The librarian frowned. He took the book from us and silently walked into the staff room behind the desk. A few minutes later he returned, holding 2 pieces of paper in his hand. I've cloned both pages for you, he said, holding out the papers to Aria. She took them and gave him a bow. Thank you, she said. The librarian gave us a nod. Good luck to your sister, he said. We headed back to the cottage. We had no lunch left for the way back, so I made my way home with a rumbling stomach. As we neared the cottage, a sweet smell filled my lungs. I worried that I hallucinated this wonderful smell until I finally saw them. Mimi's pastries. They sat on a platter on the kitchen table, steam gently rising from them. I took one into my hands. It was hot, but not so hot that I couldn't eat it. It was sweet and spiced. It's delicious, I said. I used some herbs Aria had collected a few weeks ago, replied Mimi. She stood behind the stove in the kitchen, brewing something. Aria reached into her bag and produced 2 sheets of paper from the library. We found this, she said, holding the papers out to Mimi. Mimi turned and took these pages. She squinted, her eyes darting across the text. A few minutes later, she turned back to the kitchen, looking at the shelf stacked with ingredients. She turned to Aria again. I might have to create a new treatment plan for your sister. Aria frowned. So, does that mean she's cursed? No, answered Mimi, but this gives me something to think about. The ingredients are a bit different to what I use. I have some ideas. Where did you find this, dear? In the Druid village. Mimi waved her hand. Those Druids, they always have the best recipes. End of chapter 4. You've been listening to Taylaron's story. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter.